Who knew that expanding the playoff from 4 to 12 would create so many arguments? Actually, we all did, because now there are more teams that believe they are, whether by birthright or by merit, that they belong. Steve Sarkisian, the head coach of Texas, said it would be a disservice to college football for his program, to his team, to not be in the college football playoff. A disservice. Bill Bender, Sporting News. Would college football be, should they be embarrassed if Texas does not make the field?
Yeah, I mean, it's hey, it's never a disservice to come on your show. And as I told Victoria, I've got the entire ACC figured out, so we can discuss that in a little bit.
Cool.
But I agree with Steve Sarkisian.
Really?
I think they have a very compelling case with beating 3 top 10 teams of the schedule they played. And let's be serious, had Texas played, I'm trying to pick a school, right? Because I don't want to pick on anybody.
Right.
Say they played Minnesota, beat Minnesota, and we're 10-2.
Sure.
They would be hands down a playoff team.
I agree. First of all, I agree completely, because if we're doing this because what you said was who you beat, right? My biggest problem.
What I would go ahead.
My biggest problem with this entire process is that we never talk about who you beat. We only talk about who you lost to. And to me,
that's never how I've looked at it.
So you're different, right? But when we watch on TV and we listen to the people in that room, I never hear they beat so and so. We do it in basketball too. We like parse at the end, at the bottom of the bracket, in terms. Oh, who'd you lose to? Well, tell me who you beat. All the teams you lost to, we're not going to see in a playoff. Did you beat good teams? Which is my argument about Miami, but we'll get to that in a few. Like, I don't disagree with whether or not Texas belongs in the field. My only disagreement would be doing a disservice. The entire sport sometimes does a disservice to itself.
I agree. So I was like a long time ago. I had a really good relationship with Bill Hancock, the former executive director of the college football playoff. He was he still is. I mean, just because he's retired, awesome man.
Yes, agreed.
And he said to me, one of those years when we were doing these debates, he said it has to come down to who you play. And I've always kind of ordered it this way: who do you play? Who did you beat? Who'd you lose to? That's the order I do it.
Okay.
And that's the order I think it should be done in. To me, with Texas in particular, who did you play? Ohio State. Who did you beat? 3 top 10 teams. Who'd you lose to? Ohio State, Florida. Obviously, Georgia, which is ranked top 5 as well. So you have to respect that. I think, and you know what the other striking part to me is that at no point during that A&M game did I think A&M was going to win. There was not, even at halftime, I'm still like, Texas is better than these guys. And that's a little bit of the eye test argument, which, boy, I can't wait to get into Notre Dame, Miami with you. This is going to be a lot of fun.
That's fine. Here's the thing about Texas A&M, and I'm not knocking them. They only lost the one game. They drew the most favorable, a very Indiana-ish SEC schedule. Just start at the bottom and work your way up, and that's who Texas A&M played. I'm not saying they're not really good, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're a product of their schedule as well. And I think that is the problem when we have these. I mean, the SEC is small in comparison to the Big Ten and the ACC in that they only have 16 teams. But you're still, even when in a 9-game schedule, eventually they're still playing just more than half. So Texas A&M played, I guess, half of the league. They just got the favorable side of the draw. So maybe Texas A&M, if they played Texas's schedule or Oklahoma's schedule, they wouldn't be 11-1.
Oh, I agree. I 100% agree, and that's not taken away from what Mike Elko did.
Right. I agree.
Neither one of us is doing that. It's just you're stating the reality of a world with the imbalanced schedules. And it's tough because, yes, the SEC is going to have 5 playoff teams. I don't think there's a way they can shoehorn a 6th team in. I think there's a way they could lose a playoff team, which is super exciting when you start to talk about what happens if Alabama loses to Georgia and has that 3rd loss. Are they going to get docked at all? And that's going to be an uncomfortable conversation for the SEC this week, given how Alabama's looked. So, man, the best part of this is we're going to spend the last week arguing about Miami. Here's my prediction. We're going to spend all week arguing about Miami, Notre Dame, and I think Notre Dame wins that argument out at the end, regardless of what your opinion is. And then I think the argument's going to become Miami versus Alabama, and that's going to be infinitely more fun.
I would be. First of all, I have nothing here. I think Notre Dame belongs in a playoff. I'm not. This is not. Like I've made a very conscious effort to not make this about Notre Dame versus Miami. I just want to set that aside for 1 second because I want to ask you about Duke, who's playing Virginia. If Duke wins that game, are they going to the playoff?
I don't think so. If you think about this 5 champions rule, I think the American Conference is a playing game on Friday night.
I agree.
I'm actually super excited. Here's the sickness of being a college football fan. You are very excited to watch Tulane in North Texas with lame duck coaches because one of them's going to the playoffs. So I love the sport right there in one sentence. Long sentence, but a sentence. The other end of this is, okay, JMU wins. They're 23-point favorite against Troy.
Right.
JMU would be theoretically ranked ahead of Duke. Now you're in this problem where, okay, my 5 highest conference. At that point, Jim Phillips needs to say something. And Nicole Auerbach had a tweet over the weekend that made a lot of sense to me that would have, could they have overridden the tiebreakers and said, you know what, we're just going to put Miami in the conference championship game? Would you have been opposed to that? I know Duke, every Duke fan on here is screaming. That's not the rules. But are you really opposed to that when it comes down to a 2-loss team versus a 5-loss team?
From the conference level, I wouldn't be. But if you have tiebreakers, I just don't see how you can legally. The lawsuit would be massive. I just don't see how you it'd be very college football.
It'd be an incredible lawsuit. And I have teenage kids that play all the travel sports. So, when you're looking at the tiebreakers, I've had a couple moments like that where you're like, wait, we beat that team. Why aren't we playing? And then, but you said it best. The tiebreakers are there for a reason. Yeah. Maybe not for the reason intended when we have these big, messy conferences, though.
No. Again, look, I like Duke. They've been fun. I think Duke has actually underachieved over the course of this season. I'm not saying they should have beaten Tulane. They overscheduled themselves first, which brings me back to a different conversation, is that you don't really – Texas did not benefit from playing Ohio State, right? If they missed the playoff, they do not benefit from playing Ohio State. So there's that. The other thing is that by losing a third time, Texas puts themselves we could argue because the argument about Miami, and I want to get back to the Duke thing in a second. JMU's not ranked, correct?
Not in the playoff, but in the AP Top 25 they are. So, we recognize that, and I'm not a voter in the AP Top 25,
right.
But I would have them ranked if I did have a vote.
Right, but does the committee care about that?
Well, they kind of can just say, here's the 5th one. And then, you know, in theory, that ranking does go 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. And, I don't know what Duke's ranking would be at 5 losses, but is there a sane world where we would rank them in the top 25 ahead of JMU based on a win against Virginia? And I don't think there is. And I really think, the ACC, if you're wanting, I'm not going to speak for Jim Phillips in any way, but if I were the ACC commissioner, I would have privately been hoping that SMU pulled out that game against Cal that they couldn't do the other night.
I'm sure he was. Bill Bender, by the way, Sporting News, is joining us here in the Adam Gold Show. If the AP and the coaches poll don't really matter to the committee, they can do what they want. They could rank Duke 25th if they win the game. and therefore problem solved. They don't have to rank JMU if they win the game. The fact that they are whatever and won and haven't been ranked is probably says a lot, and I think their power numbers were pretty low. Although Bill Connolly's SP Plus has them, I think, 24th at 11-1. Duke is, if I'm not mistaken, 53rd. And again, I'm not sitting here arguing for Duke because I said earlier that I think it's not even as good as 50-50 that Duke wins the game and they get in the playoff. I just think what I would have liked to have heard from Jim Phillips, I said this last year. I mean, you got to lobby. I mean, Greg Sankey, who doesn't need to lobby, lobbies. Steve Sarkisian, who might need to lobby, he lobbies. We had Mac Brown with Texas a long time ago, screaming about, we deserve this, we deserve that. And that was in a 4-team field. It appalls me that the ACC refuses to play this game. Every coach should be screaming about, we're getting disrespected, because they are, and maybe they deserve it, but that doesn't mean that you can't lobby for your own cause.
You absolutely have to. Mac Brown, by the way, was the most gentlemanly lobbyer ever. He's one of the nicest guys alive, seriously. But he did. And I always go back because, as you know, I live in Big Ten country. In 2006, Michigan and Ohio State played a 1-2 game. That was probably the best game ever in that rivalry. And when Michigan had a chance to lobby, Lloyd Carr didn't. Urban Meyer did for Florida, and the rest is history. Florida won a national championship. You have to. And I know some people don't like that. You're like, well, respect the committee's decision. Some of that went out the door when they didn't take Florida State a couple years ago, in my opinion. I respect the committee, don't get me wrong. I think that they're fantastic. They're going to do a great job. But you just said it. Is that Caddyshack when he says we can do whatever we want? We don't have to have a reason. That's the committee.
Yeah, that's right. That's Carl Spackler said that.
All
the
time when my buddies text me and say they can't do this or they can't do that, I always respond. It's so funny you say that. I always respond. They can do whatever they want.
Yep.
Because that's how this works.
It's a committee. It's not a power ranking. It's a committee. All right. Let's get into Miami versus Notre Dame. But I agree with you that it doesn't have to be – they could both get in. All right, but just to compare Miami and Notre Dame, why do you say 10-2 Notre Dame over 10-2 Miami? Bill Bender, Sporting News. At Bill Bender 90.
12 years in 12 years in Catholic school. Because I have to.
Has Lou Holtz ever drooled on you?
Teachers? No, so that's a joke, obviously. But
right.
Maybe my teachers probably would be picking Notre Dame. It's hard for me to say, okay, you had Notre Dame there at the beginning, and they have done nothing to out of the top 10, which they've been in the top 10 the whole time. They've been dominant. It was early in the season. And I'm going to sound like the world's largest hypocrite because I'm a big believer in head-to-head, and Miami does have that head-to-head. Miami did win 10 games. I think what really hurts Miami, though, and this is just a perception thing, not being in that ACC championship game. How did you lose to SMU on the road? And the turnovers there. The Louisville loss was bad. I do think when we come down to, okay, who'd you play? Pretty even. Who'd you beat? Pretty even. So now you get down to who'd you lose to. Okay, Notre Dame's losses aren't as bad as Miami's. And then 4 head-to-head should be somewhere in one of those 3. I'm not going to say it's 4 because it's not. It is important. But where do we value that head-to-head in between those 3 criteria? And we can make – if you tell me Miami should be in ahead of Notre Dame, I'm like, okay, I'm okay with that. But in what I think they're going to do, I have a hard time – and we're going to find out tomorrow night. Because once Notre Dame's ahead of Miami tomorrow night, what can they possibly realize – that they would change their mind by Sunday when both teams aren't playing.
Yeah.
That's why I say Miami not playing is hurting them.
Oh, I don't doubt that. Playing could also hurt them because we all know what Mario Cristobal's teams are capable of doing or not doing. The loss to SMU was I don't know if it's a bad loss. I think SMU is a good football team on the road, and it was in overtime. But I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I mean, to me, it's a 9-win football team. Was SMU a 9-win football team? The loss to Louisville, while in Miami, at the time, Louisville was 7-1 after that game. Then they lose their running backs, and they went into the tank until throttling Kentucky, which probably isn't all that difficult these days, to win this past weekend to close out the season on a win. I hear all the time, like the committee actually said, that Oregon is still getting credit for their win against Penn State. I don't know why, but Miami is somehow gets like denigrated by beating a one-loss or losing to a one-loss Louisville team at the time, and then injuries set in and their season went south. So the whole thing to me is, we're going to choose from column A here, column B here, and I get it because you only played 12 games and there's very little crossover between these teams. They have to figure it out some way. But I'm going to go back to what you said. There are certain criterias. Who you played, who you beat, who you lost to. Like the head-to-head, if everything else is relatively close, shouldn't the head-to-head be first? Like, why play the game?
Yeah, the games have to matter. Otherwise, we're playing like Sim City or something.
Right.
And you mentioned a phrase I use quite frequently too. Starting to wonder if we're like related and by distant cousins or something, because I always say at the time. I use the phrase at the time, and you painted a very good case for Louisville at the time. I have argued for months, because I was at the game, that the Penn State-Oregon game at the time was very different than it is now.
100%. Right? I understand why they're saying that. That Penn State team looked good.
Yeah, and I mean, if Drew Aller doesn't throw an interception, I'm starting to wonder where Penn State's entire season would be.
Yeah, they fell apart.
How devastating that loss was. And Oregon has kind of bounced back from it. So at the time always matters to me, because you could say, well, they aren't ranked now, but ask Billy Napier if that South Florida loss mattered at the time. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have a job. So I do think that's also something we consider. And the head-to-head has to matter. And if everything else is close, that's why I said, and I'm not trying to be a politician here or anything, but if they put Miami over Notre Dame at the end of this or tomorrow night, I would understand. I would say, okay, there's that. Now, when I watch, and here's the worst phrase in the world of college football, the eye test, because we all act like we're college football gurus. The eye test, however, they're pretty darn good, dude.
I agree.
They are just blowing teams out. Jeremiah Love's been amazing.
Yep.
I think C.J. Carr's a different quarterback than he was in September, but you still play those games in September.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Like I said, Notre Dame to me is a playoff team. I just think that Miami is a playoff team too, and there is enough of like if we used an NFL style like tiebreaker. There's about 6 games or 5 games that they played against similar opponents, and the final scores kind of favor Miami in those games.
And they took it to Pitt on Saturday. Which
they did.
I don't want to say completely surprising, but to go on the road and dominate in that fashion was very impressive. But then you do what's the other hypothetical thing we have to do is, if they played on a neutral field, what would the spread be? and that right now, that number favors Notre Dame.
Oh,
but again, I always like what he said about hypotheticals. He doesn't like them. I mean, we have to do them.
Right.
But, I just think it's a really tough debate, and it's going to envelop everything. But my other part of this is, let's say Alabama loses by like 14 to 17 points on Saturday. At what point are we like, hey, SMU dropped last year? Every conference championship loser typically drops a spot or two. Are we going to entertain dropping Alabama out with the third loss? My educated answer would be they won't, because it's the SEC. And Alabama does have a pretty good who you beat. But they also have a who you lost to. Remember, those week one matter now. They when they laid an egg against the Florida State team that didn't make a bowl game.
And when we hear it was so long ago when Alabama gets in, even if they lose to Georgia, I will laugh out loud. Final question for Bill Bender of Sporting News, and I appreciate your time, sir. Over under 1/2. How many ACC teams are in the playoff?
They'll get one in. I have a feeling Virginia's going to end the drama. If I had to guess, and this is absent a ton of chaos, I do think Virginia's going to win. I think they'll find it. I like their running game, by the way. They do a good job with that running game. They've got their losses out of the way. I think the Cavaliers get it done and get to the ACC or the college football playoff as a 10 or 11 seed. And I would just, like I said, my prediction is we'll move away from Notre Dame, Miami. Notre Dame gets in, and Miami, Alabama becomes our Sunday argument.
That would be
because
great.
I do think Georgia wins, depending on how that game is.
Mm-hmm.
We get into a really intense, and remember, both of those teams were left out last year. So, like you said at the top of the segment, perfect full circle. If you thought we were going to stop arguing about this stuff, we can go to 16. We'll argue about 17 and 18. You know that.
Absolutely. No doubt. We argue 68 teams in basketball. We sit here for a month and a half, and Joe Lenardi's in a bunker somewhere being fed intravenously, and we're complaining about the fourth and fifth place teams from the Mid-American Conference. Bill Bender, Sporting News. I appreciate your time, man. Always cool to chat. I hope we can do it again soon.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on. Let's have a great week. I'll talk to you soon.
You got it. Bill Bender here on the Adam Gold Show.